Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to get started because we have a very packed presentation this afternoon. Um, Thank you for joining us for our June C&W Research Lunch and Learn. I am Nicole Presley, she, her. I'm the manager of research and knowledge translation at the Women's Health Research Institute, and I'm humbled to be joining from the ancestral, unceded, and occupied territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations today. While acknowledging the lands, waters, and all the sentient beings that live in and on them, I want to thank the Indigenous peoples who have been thoughtful stewards of these lands since time immemorial. And June, as many of you know, is Indigenous History Month, which is a time to uplift Indigenous culture. And storytelling through art is such a powerful and beautiful mechanism to communicate. And for me, as someone within knowledge translation and research, and as an uninvited settler of mixed European descent, I often reflect on my own role. Um, as a knowledge translator. And so today I wanted to highlight the work of Haida artist Alvin Child. What you see here on the screen is a drum painting, which is actually called Sharing Knowledge. And what you can see is what kind of looks like an intimate interaction between a frog and a raven. And it symbolizes sharing of knowledge and power, and really showcases the interconnectedness of all things. And so this is something that I thought would be nice to share with you because we're sharing knowledge today, but also reinforces and reminds us to value the perspective of others. And really what anchors us and what unites us. We're all connected here on this beautiful planet. So I'm delighted to introduce the speakers today, who are going to share a bit about an exciting new resource on campus. And the first speaker is Fala Jin, who is a clinical research coordinator at the CRSU at BC Children's Hospital Research Institute. She's led the development of this exciting new resource and supports a variety of clinical research, registry, and knowledge translation initiatives at CNW. Dr. Miranda Amundsen is an uninvited settler of English, Scottish, and Norwegian and Chukchi descent, who resides on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples as well. Miranda's passion is supporting clinically led research by walking alongside nurses, scholars, and communities globally in mentoring, collaborating, and co-creating research that is relational, participatory, and contextually grounded. Her work strives to uplift experience, resist dominant paradigms, and nurture knowledge rooted in place, purpose, and relation. Welcome, Miranda and Fala. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for the lovely introductions. Okay, just find our presentation here today. So thank you for welcoming us into this space. Val and I are excited to chat with you all today, share some of the things that we have learned in our work at Children's and Women's, and in the development of this really exciting course. Gotta find the buttons. Okay. Building on Nicole's land acknowledgement, which was beautiful. We have one of our own in this presentation well, I'd like to acknowledge myself as an uninvited white settler here on Coast Salish territories, included the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And speaking of all the creatures of the land, ravens and frogs, this is a little Pacific wren here today, which is one of like the tiniest but loudest, the tiniest little bird with the loudest and most complex songs of any forest bird that is out there. So sometimes very difficult to notice. But in Coast Salish, it comes with a lot of different meanings, mostly the energetic, lively spirit of the forest, but also for its cleverness, adaptability, and the transition of seasons. What I really like about this tiny little bird is that in Coach Salish stories, it's often depicted as a meek little character, which is outsized by influence, but it relies on both its wit and loud voice to claim space. So I thought that this might be a nice segue into today, and I'm actually just going to paste in the chat here the Song of the Pacific Wren for anyone who might need some Spirit of the Forest today. And as a reminder for today, or for those who align with this type of messaging, that listening to voices both loud and quiet can always bring different lessons for us. Okay, so a few session goals we have to share with you today. I'm going to start by talking about what we understand is the current research culture at BC Women's and BC Children's Hospitals, and what kind of opportunities this information led us to identify. And then, as Nicole mentioned, exploring this new research course, which Val is going to lead us through, that aligns with some of the findings in the research culture work. I would like to acknowledge that I am presenting this research culture work, but it definitely was not done alone. Many collaborators invested in this work, including Sandy Tatla, who's our Director of Learning and Development, Nicole Presley, Jennifer Clayton, and Dr. Kimberly Miller as well. So, to provide a bit of context about why we were looking into the research culture across CNW, is we were really interested in supporting clinically led research, particularly for nurses and allied healthcare providers who often don't have opportunities to engage in research and are, of course, very busy with clinical care. So we were interested in looking broadly about what literature might exist and what we could do to support this engagement in research. So we conducted a rapid review and we found several different things, which some might resonate, some might not, but grouped into the facilitators, barriers, and context here. So the facilitators were actually the ones most spoken about in the literature, which is great news. And facilitators to engagement in research for those in clinical practice included their experience. So if they had some kind of exposure to research and involvement in research projects at any level, they were more likely to engage in research projects. If there was a culture of research, going back to the main theme of this component of the presentation, and what that looked like was if there was research embedded into like the organizational structure. So when we're thinking about like values, mission, policies, if research was a core component of how the organizational structure was set up, then that was a strong facilitator to engagement in research. And having leadership support too. So, particularly our direct report leaders, if they support engagement in research, then folks are most likely to get involved. Now, leadership support or having leaders support research was also defined by their own experience in research. So, again, if they had been involved in any research projects or if they had done different degrees that had research components, then they were more likely to support research in their programs. And access to education, which is again a component we're going to talk more about a little bit later. So, folks who had access to research education, even if that was like in previous degrees, but definitely like within organizations so that they could learn new skills or build upon those skills or refresh themselves, was also seen as a facilitator. Now, the barriers, well, the minimally discussed ones in the literature were very consistent. So, folks were clear that they needed time. One of the things to having time to engage in research was backfill from clinical positions. They really needed those research skills, which links into our facilitator of education. Funding was a very helpful component. So when there's no funding, it's difficult to overcome some of the barriers that they face. And the other interesting thing is acceptance. So I talked a little bit about leadership support in accepting research, but also acceptance from peers. So if folks felt that their peers were more likely to support their research endeavors, then likely they would engage in research. Now, when we were looking particularly at pediatric or women's health, like the literature was like very limited. Things around barriers and facilitators reflected the general literature, like the ones that I just spoke about. But what was very clear was there was a very strong anti-pervasive research culture that's found in specialized organizations. But was what was emphasized is that understanding like individual organization or individual context was really what was necessary to really grasp that research culture that's happening. So we set out to measure this research culture using a survey that we distributed broadly across the organizations. And of course, ideally, we looked for validated tools through a literature review in nursing and allied health in particular, but we didn't find that any single tool met the criteria. So we ended up combining three different validated tools: the research capacity and culture tool, the shortened evidence-based practice implementation scale, and the Swedish nurses' attitudes towards research and development in nursing. And then what we did is we used the implementation frameworks of the COM-B and theoretical domains and mapped those to the barriers and facilitators in the literature review. And you can see on the bottom right there that I physically did it because I'm a post-it person, a visual learner. So taking all of those things that I spoke about in the previous slide and physically mapping them to the questions presented by all these three tools. And that's how we developed the survey. Why that button doesn't want to work. Okay, so let's talk about the results. So about 300, well, not about 373 folks viewed and consented. We did have some incomplete. So we had 292 responses included in the analysis, which is a 12% response rate across nursing and allied health. But to note, some of those were not complete or incomplete, but still included. As you can see from the graph on the right, like almost 50% of those who completed were RNs, followed by allied health, leaders, nurse practitioners, etc. Just a bit of the demographics. So, some of the questions we asked first were around job descriptions and time dedicated to research, building on our demographic factors here. So, we can see that a small percentage, 18%, believe that they had research in their job description, which is quite low. But about 25% had time dedicated to research. The majority of those had 1 day dedicated to research, followed by 3 days and then 2 days. But to note, which is not included on this graph, folks didn't always get to utilize those days in research as they were often pulled into other priorities or clinical practice. Now, the remainder of the results we separated into the COM-B framework or capability, opportunities, and motivating factors. So when looking at research capabilities, this part of the survey was laddered. So first we asked folks if they had experience in research, which as you can see, 50% said they did. If they did indicate they had experience in research, we asked them pretty much the next string of 8 questions here about their confidence in finding literature and critically reviewing literature, and then onto the very more, I guess, specific components of research. So you can see like there was a pretty good amount that felt confident in finding and critically reviewing literature. But when we got into the details of research and proposals or ethics applications or funding applications, you can see that kind of gradual decline in confidence there. For folks who didn't have experience in research, so the 32% here, we didn't ask them those specific questions, but we asked them the last two. So whether or not they felt comfortable in identifying knowledge gaps, which 22% said yes, and whether or not the literature that they're finding applies to their clinical practice or perhaps the problem that they're looking for. In terms of opportunities, then, so interestingly, folks felt that a lot of patients and families were engaged or interested in being engaged in research, and that the organization does support evidence-informed practice. So, going back to a facilitator, having that built in the infrastructure. About 64% felt that their peers would support their engagement in research, and 53% felt their leaders would support their engagement in research. So a strong, again, facilitator back to the lit review there. As we can see, more specific components about do we celebrate the research that's happening? Only 44% felt that we did. And then having access to infrastructure or experts to help guide us, only 39% felt that was an opportunity. And then you can see we get less and less in opportunities to get involved, especially or if they're in clinical practice as well, and few opportunities to share. And again, consistent with the literature, time and backfill, as well as having like equipment or administrative support were ranked very low by respondents. So when we look at motivation, we see very strongly that folks believe that research does improve outcomes, like 94.2%, the highest overwhelming response. And 92% did feel it was valuable, and almost 80 felt it was essential for their own professional development. But we can see that folks were still feeling that clinical work, well, I mean, 50% felt it was more important, and still 30% that felt that clinical experience is more reliable. And then separately in the middle, just to point out that folks still felt a bit torn, or not really torn, I guess. 65% felt that there were times where it was still inappropriate to include patients in research activities. And I think Fala will talk a bit more about that component. Okay, we also threw in some questions about recruitment and retention because we were interested how opportunities to engage in research might impact whether folks wanted to work in organizations or would recruit others to work there. So there was still a pretty strong intention to stay within the organization, but almost 60% felt that research opportunities would attract others to the organization, with 57% like wanting to engage in practice-based research or clinically led research, and 51% felt that they would stay if they had the opportunities to engage in research. So pretty strong numbers there. We also asked some open-ended questions in the survey. So the first one here about what a research culture at Children's and Women's look like to you. And of course, this word cloud is built on the number of responses. So we can see at the center that having more time, consistent with both the survey results, but also the literature review. But second, the value of it. So knowing that it's valued within the organization by our leaders, by our peers, came second. Folks really wanted to have the support to follow their curiosity, and collaborate with interdisciplinary teams, multidisciplinary teams, and see what can be done to improve care or outcomes for patients, have education and resources to support that, and not have their research ideas just completely quashed when bringing them forward. Here's some quotes that folks provided for us, like just a sampling of them. They said that it was important that embracing research as a valued tool and mechanism for achieving better outcomes, having more opportunities to be involved or a part of a team, having more visibility about research currently being done, a willingness to change practice in light of new evidence, and encourage from management to participate in research studies, and having a balance of time for education and research activities to promote better evidence-based practices, support clinically meaningful research work, interprofessional research, and build research skills as a part of our work. So all this to say, I mean, my takeaways from this information are that we see like really strong motivation for engagement in research among nurses and allied health clinicians at Children's and Women's. And I think this really, reinforces that research is for everyone, and that research can be shared. So there are support, educational opportunities, resources that would be beneficial for those interested in engaging in research activities. And just like the title, Research is Care, there is opportunities to strengthen the connection between clinical care and the research activities that are happening or that could be happening when coming from clinical practice. Okay. So, based on all that information, I'm going to hand it over to Fala now to talk about this one initiative that came out of this work.
Okay, thanks so much, Miranda. I think we can just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so onto the course. So why we set out to building this course is largely based on the work that Miranda did with the research culture survey. So we are hearing that clinical staff have strong interest in research and engaging with research. But also as part of the results shows that there seems to be some sort of mixed understandings about how research is conducted and how people can get involved. So there is a lot of opportunities to learn. But what we are finding out in terms of education resources that's already out there from the research world is that a lot of these resources are largely designed for people who are already involved in research. So think about GCP, Div5, or some of the literature review or grant writing workshops that may not be super relevant or for a typical clinical staff member. So this lack of educational resources is creating a high barrier for entry for clinical staff who just wanted to learn a little bit about research, but don't have a lot of prior experience. So what we really wanted to do with this course is that we wanted to provide a first step for clinical staff for them to feel comfortable, informed, and confident when engaging with research. And we see that as a foundational step towards building research awareness on campus. Next slide, please. And just a quick introduction on the team behind building this course. So we would like to highlight that this project benefited from the input of several different perspectives. The core working group included representations from BCCHR, WHI, and Learning and Development. We also engaged CNW clinical staff, the REACH KT committee, and our national partner, MyCERN. We also received support from PHSA, BCCHR, and WHR leadership throughout the development of this course to really help ensure that the course was relevant to clinical staff and also aligned with organizational and research priorities. Next slide, please. So our goal with this course was rather than focusing on building any technical research skills, we just wanted to provide staff with a basic understanding of research and its role within healthcare. So to guide the course design, we focused on 4 questions that we felt would be the most relevant to a typical clinical staff member. So these are, what is research? How is research conducted? Why does research matter? And how can I get involved? Importantly, the goal is also not to train staff to conduct research or complete any study procedures like informed consent or data collection, but it's just really to increase research and awareness and provide a starting point for people who are interested to learn more about research. Next slide, please. So how did this course take shape? As we began developing the course, we explored a range of existing educational resources out there. As I mentioned, many existing resources assume a level of prior research knowledge that was beyond the needs of our intended audience. So to kind of identify more accessible approaches to introducing research, we reference some resources that were developed for patient partner onboarding. So while clinical staff and patient partners have different roles, we felt like they may share a similar level of learning needs when it comes to understanding research at a foundational level. So one resource that informed our early development of the course was the CIHR IMHA Patient Partner Training Program. And from there, we focused on identifying the content that would be relevant and accessible for our audience. We also consider factors such as course length, workload, and the time constraints faced by busy clinical staff. So our goal was to ensure that the course could be completed within a reasonable amount of time while still providing meaningful content. So in the end, we selected a self-paced online format to support the accessibility, scalability, and broad reach among clinical staff. Next slide, please. Thank you. So once we've established the overall scope and the structure of the course, we moved into content development and review. So we sought feedback from multiple groups to help refine the course. So this include user testing done locally in CNW and also a national review through the MyCern network. And all the feedbacks received helped us improve the clarity, relevance, and accessibility of the content. We also incorporated leadership video messages to reinforce key ideas about the role of research within CNW and PHSA that we would like to convey. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect, thank you. So just to share a little bit about what we heard from the user testing and results. So one of the things that we one of the things that we established was that reviewers wanted to see clinical staff presented more clearly throughout the course. So particularly from the perspective of nursing and allied health, and also examples of how research connects to everyday practice. Also, there was strong support for keeping the course practical and accessible. Reviewers encouraged us to focus on foundational concepts and avoid unnecessary complexity or technical language. And finally, many reviewers emphasized the importance of making research feel local and relevant by showcasing examples of research happening at CNW and highlighting opportunities for staff engagement. So these themes informed many of the refinements we made to the final course. And in the next few examples, we will illustrate how that feedback was incorporated into the final product. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first half of the course, we focused on the content that would help staff understand why research matters and how it connects to their work. So we knew from Miranda's work that many staff were interested in research, but at the same time, we really wanted to emphasize that research is also not just an individual interest, but an important part of our organizational mission. So in the first section of the course, which I had a small preview on the left side of the screen, we highlighted the operational, clinical, and patient level value of conducting research. So this includes research as part of PHSA's mandate, the role of research in supporting evidence-informed practices, and the ways research can support patient and family engagement. And then on the right side of the screen, we also wanted staff to see that there are many different ways that people can engage with research. So that ranges from just general research and awareness, engaging with evidence-informed care, to supporting research activities as part of their day-to-day work, to more active collaboration or leading their own research projects. What we wanted to emphasize here is that there's no single right way to engage with research. This is to really encourage clinical staff to interact with research in the ways that aligns with their own personal goals and interests. And by highlighting these different types of experiences, we hope to make research feel more approachable and help staff identify where they might fit within the broader research landscape. Next slide, please. And in the second half of the course, we included basic introduction to the different types of research and the research process. So here we just really wanted learners to understand the breadth of research conducted within healthcare and understand that research can take many forms. So to introduce different types of research, we drew on the CIHR 4 research pillars as a familiar framework for organizing our content. A second consideration was making research feel local and relevant. So we focused on highlighting a lot of the contents that were specific to the Oak Street campus, including photos of the research facilities on site and projects led by CNW researchers. Our goal here was to help staff recognize that research is already part of the environment which they work in and provide concrete examples of how research contributes to patient care. And finally, we paid particular attention to showcasing nursing and allied health research. We wanted to avoid presenting research solely through the lens of physician-led studies and instead highlight the many professions that can contribute to research at CNW. So this is one of the ways we try to reinforce the idea that research is relevant to everyone and that there are multiple pathways for staff to engage regardless of their professional background. Next slide, please. So here are just some of the quick examples that we used in terms of local facilities and projects that were showcased in the course. Next slide, please. And then also, I just wanted to quickly highlight, we also included a special section on clinical trials. But I wanted to make clear that the course is intended as a broad introduction to research. However, clinical trials, because it often involves unique regulatory and operational considerations, we felt that it would be important to highlight for the staff to understand. And again, our goal is not to provide any formal clinical trials training, but just to give people a high-level understanding of how clinical trials work and why they are conducted. Next slide, please. We also introduced several key concepts that staff may encounter when supporting clinical trials activities, such as regulatory oversight, GCP, and participant safety. Next slide, please. This is just an example of one of the sections that was included. But I just wanted to highlight that throughout the section, we aim to provide explanations that are practical and to the point without it getting overly technical for our audience. Next slide, please. And a key consideration here was helping learners connect a lot of these concepts to their own work. So wherever possible, we included examples of how clinical staff may interact with clinical trials in practice and highlighted the important role staff play in supporting safe and high quality research. Next slide, please. So this is the final course that resulted from the development and review process we've described. The course is will be available, through Learning Hub for CNW staff. And currently there is also a national version of the course hosted through the MyCERN and Impact platform, and that one is already live. But regardless, the course is intended for all staff members, regardless of prior research experience or level of involvement in research activities. Next slide, please. Okay, and as we wrap up, we would like to share a few updates for what's coming next. So Research is Care will be launched broadly across CNW through existing communication channels, including newsletters and CRCnet, and we will also provide a promotional toolkit to support the dissemination efforts. We're currently working through the final steps of organizational review and preparing for the launch. And next, rather than I'm going to open up to the group. So rather than ending with us telling you what we're going to do for promoting this course, we would like to hear from the audience today. If you have any thoughts on how we should spread the word, is there any particular teams, groups, communication channels, or network that we should consider for the launch? Or if you have any suggestions that you have for the promotion of the course, you're welcome to speak up raise your hand or share your ideas in the chat. Nicole, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Nicole, you're
I
muted.
am
Sorry, we
muted.
missed
I
that.
am
Yeah.
talking, but I said we can open it up for questions as well. I'm just going to remove your spotlight so that we can see everyone. Matthias, you should be able to
Yeah,
unmute.
thanks. This sounds quite interesting. I am curious, given that the goal of this is primarily to promote awareness, the next obvious step is then okay, now I've learned about it, what should I do practically? So have we considered courses that either do some sort of peer mentorship or getting involved in a research team type thing to get your feet wet? Or how are we considering to build I'm not sure if community of practice is the right word for this kind of thing, but like like talk to people who've done this a little bit rather than going the big leap and saying, I want to become a co-investigator in someone else's trial. But like getting involved in a stepwise fashion might be a nice way for people to say, I love this or this is not for me type thing. So is there a plan or are there plans to consider having additional, more hands-on type either educational materials and or some opportunities to network or get involved in something practically? Thank you.
Miranda, can I pass that to you to talk about kind of the work being done in the background with learning and development?
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. Great questions. Um, Building off what Nicole was saying, like the learning and development team and my role in that does offer support for nurses, allied health, well, anyone really, it's not disciplinary specific, who are interested in engaging in research that can come, and that can look like a variety of different things in terms of like our consultation process. I usually meet with folks and kind of explore their interests. Some folks definitely want to take up individual kind of projects and be investigators or co-investigators, which almost always ends up with like a multidisciplinary team, anyways, to support whatever research interest and to represent like all the views, both clinically and from patients and those with lived experiences. Sometimes there are folks who do just want, as you're saying, Matthias, to have some exposure in research. So sometimes we can link them up with existing teams that we already know, like across our relationships, like with WHRI and BCCHRI, or with investigators with projects, or in some of the scholarship that we're taking up around research culture and a variety of other things, clinician scientist roles, et cetera. So but all that to say, it's definitely has limits, I guess, into it in terms of like how much capacity we have. And well, I view it as a strength in kind of that one-on-one mentorship. It definitely only has limited reach too. So quite often, that role or this role that I occupy functions as a networker too. And then I can direct folks to, well, I quite often to Nicole or to Jen, who obviously have the more intimate knowledge of the research institutes and investigators in there too. So we are working on building that, but I think that there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, and maybe Miranda, if I can just make a quick note, like Matthias, this is a very collaborative thing, like with Miranda's role, what we learned at the research institutes was that from these results, the survey results, that not all clinical staff on site are aware that the research institutes even exist, but they know who Miranda is, they know learning and development, so using it as a bridge to also connect them with our ecosystem. I think to your point about the kind of educational capacity building for them, Miranda and her colleagues have done an incredible job when they piloted the practice-based research challenge on site, which was 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. So there is some curriculum that was developed for that, and PBR is quite a wide provincial initiative that exists within other health authorities that we aim to learn from as well. So yes, and we're happy to connect with you if you're interested in being a part of this ecosystem. Greg.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Fala, good to see you again. And Miranda, very nice to meet you. I just want to thank you both so much and the whole team. I know how heavy a lift this was. This is going to be an absolutely fantastic resource for people, and really just do want to appreciate the time and effort that you and the team have put into creating it. Sort of a two-parter, and it may just be that I misheard something, Fala, as you were commenting towards the end. Who is going to be who will be able to take this course within the PHSA world, and how broadly will your communications plan be reaching out into the PHSA ecosystem?
Nicole, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I think at this point, Greg, our like what we did with this course, or what Fala did with this course, is really tailor it to the CNW audience. So it very much was kind of site wide, but we've fully recognized that there may be utility elsewhere. Like for us, Fala did an incredible job collating examples of research within the clinical program. So those are all kind of the local tailoring. But I know we're a very collaborative bunch. So if other PHSA programs are interested in this, we have to get through the green button push and launch it. But we intend to learn from it and iterate over time. So, and I think, Fala, you may have more to say, because there is the MyCERN version that is more generic.
Mhm.
So did you want to speak to that,
Yeah,
Fala?
yeah, for sure. And I also just wanted to comment for this course, it will exist on Learning Hub, and I think the course will be there so anybody can search for it, and we did not put any restrictions on who could take the course. Now, but just also being cognizant that there's a lot of content that is very CNW specific for this version. And for the Meister version that's already live, it's hosted through the Impact website, or their part of their curriculum. It's a free platform where everybody could just register themselves and access, and the content in there. So the examples that we highlighted are more national examples. So you can see, you will see like research projects from Toronto, Calgary, things like that being highlighted in that version, and that's kind of tailored towards a more national audience. And also, thanks for being part of the course and part of the filming, Greg. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Any other questions, thoughts? I mean, the folks on this call in this Lunch and Learn, you all have a wealth of knowledge. Just thinking about, how might you get the word out about this amazing new resource? And how can we support you in that endeavor? Bill, please.
I mean, I have a suggestion to offer. You could market it extensively towards senior PHSA administrators, because they're the ones who have the final sign off. And when any research project is going through, there are also the program utilization forms, etc. So I think senior administrators really do need to appreciate a sense of urgency of doing research, because some of them do and some of them don't. Well, I'll say it that way. So yeah, make sure senior PHSA administrators are aware of this course, please.
Thank you, Bill. Consider it noted in our knowledge user audience list. Yeah. Yeah, that is part of, as Miranda was saying, the culture of research, being able to respond to research opportunities, right? I think many of us folks know the kind of reputational situation with doing clinical trials here in BC. So being able to really action our research is an important aspect. All right. Any other thoughts?
I'll just add at the end, I've taken up a lot of space in talking already today, but I as bringing forwards like and sharing the voice of like the clinical staff like across CNW, like folks are really interested, and there have been like a lot of great strides in the organizational structure and things to like support like research as care. And so I hope we can work together to break down some of the barriers between like the great work that's happening and its relationship to clinical practice, but then also like the great ideas that are coming from clinical practice and how we can support those folks to engage in research more. And because we know that like peer support is so important, I think there's great opportunities here to like take what we've learned from research, that research culture work, and really make that connection strong, because it's clear that it's possible and it's clear that there's opportunity to do so.
Thanks so much, Miranda. Yeah, we're lucky. We have a captive audience. We've identified a need, and Fala's developed a strategy to meet that need, we hope.